Hello, welcome back to Amy's Eyes. Today we're reading chapter 9. And, oh dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Johnny's so long at the fair. The loss of the letter from the captain was of serious consequence to Amy, and gave unexpected results. When 2 weeks more were past, and a whole month well gone since the captain left, Amy believed that surely the captain was dead. That was his very prophecy. He had told Amy that if she didn't hear from him in a month, then she might count him dead. Now Amy entered a decline that was marked and hurried. She lay abed all day, hardly stirring, staring at the ceiling. Thrice now she had been deserted, by her father, by Missy Clare, and now by the captain. Why let life be a further burden? Why endure it? So Amy might have thought, as she lay in her bed quietly, hardly breathing. And then, in the 6th week of the captain's absence, a wonderful thing happened. Amy had not been rising up with the other girls at daybreak, but Mrs. Hill was holding close to the idea that time would cure her, and soon she would be up and off playing again. The doctor came around and said, "It's a loss of heart." So Amy was not forced to leave her bed. One of the ladies came around every morning with a tray of breakfast, which was set at Amy's bedside. But in recent days the outlay had gone cold. Neither did Amy eat any other meal, and she drank only water. But on the particular morning that we are examining for its wonder, the breakfast tray was not set nicely on the small table at Amy's bedside. Instead, the good lady who brought it dropped it on the floor, which made a clatter of broken dishes and glass that was not quite as loud as the good lady's cry of dismay when she beheld Amy that day. And other ladies and children came running, and all voices entered into the clamor and cries of astonishment, for behold, Amy had changed into a doll. Her face was now of cloth, and her hair was yellow yarn. She lay staring at the ceiling with her blue button eyes, and the thread of her mouth was a stitching of red. The transformation happened overnight, as quickly as that, and she was no bigger than the captain had been when he was a doll. Miss Quince wedged through the crowd around Amy's bed. Her voice cut through the rest. "Tear her up! Make rags out of her! She's horrible." Miss Hill would have none of that. In truth, she was becoming quite distressed at Miss Quince's miserable outlook on the world. Amy, of course, would not be torn into rags. Mrs. Hill took her gently up and away to her room. She found a shoe-box and laid Amy inside it, speaking as she did so. "My dear, I believe in your captain. I've had delays myself. Nothing is proved by absence. He lay in a shoe-box for 4 long years when you were very young, waiting in the dark to see you again. And now, even though it be 4 whole years again, certainly he will return to you one day. Meanwhile, you shall wait on a shelf in the fresh linen closet. It is dry and quiet there, and you must comfort yourself with the happy memories of your days together." Mrs. Hill looked at Amy for a long time. Then she put the lid on the box and placed it on a high shelf in the fresh linen closet, and left her alone. No one else knew she was there. So now Amy was 1,000 miles away, in some place that was absolutely dark and totally empty. Whether she was infinitely small inside her doll body, or infinitely large outside of it, she could not tell. She had heard Mrs. Hill speak to her, and she might have thanked her for her care, but everything seemed so utterly far away that she could not cross the distance even to blink an eye or move her lips. But then, she thought to herself, since she was a doll, she must have button eyes, and a stitched line for a mouth. So what might she have done after all? She lay in the dark, in the immense distance away, as a doll in its awareness, and for a while she thought no more. When next she had a thought, it was a day later, though it seemed to her only a few seconds. She thought about the captain, and wondered if he was truly dead. When Amy had been a girl, and not a doll, she was sure that the captain was dead. This was all the cause of her grief, and yet the cause of her changing into a doll. Yet now, being a doll, she was not so sure. Dolls have a great patience also. Dolls know how to wait, and how to keep love. A world-hardened, weary man in his middle years might one day come across a stuffed bear he loved as a child and be surprised, and his hardness broken in a minute as he feels a tug in his breast, as if a line immensely long and thin were still attached between his heart and the scuffed and forgotten friend. But the bear never doubted. So Amy lay quietly, and in the serenity of the shoebox she passed several weeks, remembering the happy times that she and the captain had been together. Then, on a certain day, Miss Quince opened the closet door wherein Amy lay. She loaded some sheets over her arm, reached to close the door, and her glance fell upon the shoebox on the top shelf. She put the sheets down, and on tiptoe reached for the box. Letting her heels fall to the floor, she opened the shoebox and discovered Amy. "Aha!" she said, "so I've found your hiding place. And now won't you make a fine kitchen mop?" But then, feeling a presence behind her, she turned and beheld Mrs. Hill. A look was cast between them that caused Miss Quince's ears to grow red and hot as she dropped the shoebox and hurried away. Mrs. Hill then took the shoebox to her own room, and there Amy would stay in a bottom dresser drawer until the captain returned, if he returned. Miss Quince's only relief from this humiliation was to contemplate what she might have done to Amy, if only she had gotten away with the shoebox. She had no great fear that the captain would really return, her experience in the matter, proven so harshly as to be the very code of her soul, was that sailors, no matter what they promise, do not return. Miss Quince sat stiffly in her chair, improving on this conceit as if it were a pet reptile. Sailors do not return, and that's all there is to it. Still, she had a lingering doubt about the captain. After all, Amy was not the captain's sweetheart, but his sister. That's how he had addressed her in the letter, "Ahoy, sister!" And that is a different sort of love. Miss Quince clawed at the arm of her chair and considered this. If the captain did not drown, as she had dearly hoped he would, then he might return. Yes, it would be best to have Amy torn into kitchen rags, stopping up rat holes and mopping up filth. Miss Quince smiled to think of it. Yet she had failed in that. She thought and wondered how else she might accomplish the ruin of this relationship between Amy and the captain. Each day Miss Quince listened for the post-rider's whistle. This is a cheerful sound for most persons, a bright and airy clarion, the announcement of a great magic being performed. The mere marks on paper can so convey the cast of a loved one's mind, and the warmth of the heart, that these sketches of a few drops of ink are kept as a treasure forever, tied perhaps in a dusty ribbon bundle, and handled with caresses. But to Miss Quince the whistle was a shrill call that moved her to hope for tragic news. She hurried to receive the letters, thrilling to think that maybe the captain was dead. And that's it for this week. I hope you'll be back next week.